Welcome to the CSBP Market Update. I'm Yana O'Kane, CSBP Product Manager, and joining me today, as always, is Ben Sudlow.
Good morning, Yana. Nice to see you hosting today.
Thanks, Ben. We're recording this update on the 9th of July, 2026. Ben, you recently attended the International Fertiliser Association Conference. What is IFA and what were the key themes that stood out for you?
Annually, the global fertiliser industry gets together. It gets all the suppliers of the global fertiliser companies come together and all the buyers come together, plus a whole lot of traders. You know, that really brings together the opening sort of discussion, negotiation of what supply arrangements have been like and what supply arrangements look like for the coming year. So that's been a big event, all the major producers of NPK and everything else. And probably the key takeaways from that is, well, there's a lot of talk about what happened in the last 4 months around the war and what the future of ammonium phosphates, which perhaps we'll come to a bit later. Cautious optimism given the problems that we've seen over the last 4 months around supply of just about everything other than potash.
Let's start with urea. Can you walk us through the latest developments in the global urea market?
When we last spoke, just prior to an Indian tender, the tender was run and won, and what that saw prices correct down quite sharply. There hasn't been a lot of demand for urea. Suddenly China was back in supplying urea again, and a lot of the traders were trying to get rid of positions they'd taken for pre the tender. So the prices now, as hard as it to believe, are now below what they were prior to the war starting in early March this year. This is with urea. So this has happened quite recently. We haven't seen that flow through to the purchases that we've seen coming through to our market yet, as we're still carrying a lot of ships that we've got in store, and we've got the last couple of ships arriving in coming weeks.
And so what does that mean for local markets?
Look, prices of urea have drifted down quite considerably. I think we saw a price peak at around $1,500 to $1,600 a tonne, and prices are now in the sort of $1,000 a tonne mark.
Turning to Flexion, what's happening in global markets there, Ben?
Flexion or UAN has not reset yet. China has not come back to the market despite the fact they have returned for urea. And whilst there is some expectation that this may happen, that hasn't been announced yet. Flexion prices have not returned initially to the speed with which we've seen decline in urea markets. Having said that, only in the last couple of days, the US producers have now putting their prices out for their pre-fill for their domestic market. That has seen prices correct down. And look, should we be able to get hold of supply and or what we're manufacturing, that should be starting to reflect into what we might see pre-fill prices into late this year for 2027 usage.
So how do you think that'll influence our pre-fill market locally?
Well, right now we're still focusing on getting the volume out that we're still manufacturing locally. We've got a ship arriving now, so that'll see July demand and August demand for actual in-crop usage, pretty much see that this sort of like usage season out, and then we reset ourselves for the pre-fill for 2026, 27, and you know that would typically roll through to October usage, and we're just resetting ourselves on manufacture and importing to meet that demand.
And one of the biggest talking points at the moment is phosphates. What are we learning there?
Now, I think phosphates, well, actually more specifically sulphur, and it's the impact of sulphur on phosphates is probably the talking point of the International Fertiliser Conference. And look, the context is a couple of fold. So sulphur constitute around half of the raw material that goes into making MAP. Now, sulphur prices prior to the war starting were already quite high at $400 a tonne. Price of sulphur has continued to rise. And I think a lot of it was sold even as recently as last week is about $1,200 a tonne and hasn't abated yet. There's a supply problem because that's stuff that comes out of the Persian Gulf. And secondly, some of the Russian producers have had their plants damaged by Ukrainian drones. So now Russia, rather than being an exporter, is now an importer. And China is also protecting their sulphur supply. Given that volume of sulphur that's used to make MAP, a lot of the producers are now saying at these prices of sulphur, we cannot make money making MAP at the moment. There's some of the smaller second-tier producers are shutting down production completely and putting plants into care and maintenance. And even the largest producer being OCP in Morocco, they've announced in the last week or two that at these sulphur prices, we are not making MAP or DAP. So there's quite a significant collapse in global supply. And at the same time, partly because of the same thing, is China is also, I think the expectation for many at the conference is that China will not be re-entering the ammonium phosphate market for 26 and through to 27. So the outlook for ammonium phosphates is pretty severe in terms of price escalation. And I think if there's anything to watch at the moment is what we really need to see is sulphur prices come off and ideally collapse to give the chance for some of these producers to get back in and produce again, particularly as demand starts coming through to the back end of this year.
And Ben, before we wrap up, is there anything else?
Probably remiss to have not said something about the opening of the strait. I know
of course.
The strait's now open. A lot of urea has come out. That also did add to the urea price falling. A lot of cargoes, including some of ours, are now sailing to the coast of Australia, and that's released a lot of additional volume that probably wasn't expected to come into Australia. That's sort of come out in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is a good thing for releasing those poor cargoes that have been sitting there for months at a time.
Ben, thanks for the updates. As always, if you'd like to discuss your fertiliser requirements, please get in touch with your CSBP account manager. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
This podcast is provided as general information only. The content of this podcast is not a recommendation and has been prepared without taking your objectives or circumstances into account. Before acting on the content of this, you should consider its appropriateness to your circumstances and seek independent advice.